Hello, everybody. Welcome to English Digest. I'm Tom.
Hi, I'm Stephanie.
It is our culture unit for the month of June. And we're talking about different cultures all over the world. Today we're going to the UK, the United Kingdom. And if you've ever been there before, you may have noticed some iconic structures there. You know, Big Ben, London Bridge, London Tower, what is that, the London Eye, that big
London
Ferris
Eye.
wheel.
Yeah.
And maybe you've seen those double-decker buses there as well. But maybe you've also noticed the red telephone boxes. And what the heck are they still doing there? Do people use those anymore? Aren't they using their cell phones?
Well, we have telephone booths, as we call them, here in Taiwan and in America. I was just telling Tom before we started that I actually saw someone using the payphone the other day here in Taiwan. I always look at it and think, does anyone use that anymore? But I did see someone using it. And maybe, you forgot your phone at home and you need to make a call home. You'd use it. Notice that they call them telephone boxes in the UK. But in America, we call them phone booths.
Yeah, B-O-O-T-H, phone booth. But if you're in the UK and you say that, well, they'll probably understand you, but the term that they use there is telephone box, and that's what we're going to be talking about. The red telephone boxes in the UK, they've been given some kind of new purposes instead of for being used as a phone, because most people carry their own cell phones these days. So let's get to it. Let's read through the entire contents of our lesson right now, and then we'll return.
Anyone walking around London will likely encounter a red telephone box along the way. They're still common, despite the fact that few people use public telephones in the era of the cell phone. One reason for this is their popularity as a symbol of England. These iconic phone boxes are such beloved sights that people are devising new purposes for them to ensure they don't disappear. Sir Giles Scott, a British architect, came up with the original design. Scott intended for the boxes to be silver. However, the UK Post Office suggested they be painted bright red, making them easy to spot. The public became fond of the color. In the 1980s, British Telecom, BT, took over ownership of the boxes and proposed painting them yellow to match its brand. There were campaigns against the move, and BT dropped the idea. These days, there's not much demand for public phones. Yet, rather than removing the phone boxes, people are using them for other purposes. Over 150 boxes in different locations around the UK are now public libraries or book exchange sites. One in the north of England has become an art gallery. Several house automated external defibrillators, AEDs, devices that can restart a person's heart in an emergency. If you visit the UK and see a red phone box, take a glance inside. You never know what you might find.
Okay, let's dive right into our lesson. We're talking about a modern role for the UK's red telephone boxes, or telephone booths, or sometimes they're referred to simply as public telephones. Here in Taiwan, of course, I don't really remember there being a lot of telephone booths around. They would have payphones in various locations that were kind of open to the air, but they weren't really in a booth. They were around the actual booths that you could go inside, but they were kind of few and far between.
Yeah, I know of two just right now. I'm thinking of two in my neighborhood, and they aren't enclosed. So they're open to the air, but there are phones still there that you can use. And they get used maybe once a month, not very often. These are really cute, though, these red telephone boxes. If you haven't seen one, you should look them up on the internet. Of course, the telephone booth in America was made very famous by a superhero who would go into them and change into his superhero costume, I guess, or his uniform, and that's Superman.
Exactly. So, yeah, telephone booths are still around, and we're talking specifically about the ones in the UK. And anyone walking around London will likely encounter a red telephone box along the way. So, again, you'll encounter a telephone box. To encounter as a verb just means you come across something, you find it. In this particular case, though, to encounter means you kind of come across it, but you did not intend to find it. You just kind of crossed paths with it.
Yeah, well, they're still common, meaning you find them quite frequently along streets or on sidewalks. It says, despite the fact... this is a phrase you can just replace with although or even though. So they're still common, although a few people use public telephones in the era of the cell phone or the smartphone, as most of us have these days. Era here just means a period of time in history, and it usually has some distinct characteristics. The golden era of radio, which was back in, I think, the 1930s in America. So there's always some sort of era people, associate with something in particular. I remember for the 90s, for me at least, it was the era, it was kind of the birth of the internet. And getting online and making very simple pages. I loved the internet when it first was, kind of brand new. It didn't look as cool as it does now, though.
Yeah, I could say that the 70s and the 80s were the era of the answering machine. And then maybe the 90s, that was the era of the pager. BB calls, they used to call those here. And, of course, now we're in the era of the cell phone. And smartphones are actually a type of cell phone, but we usually call our present devices smartphones. And one reason for this is their popularity as a symbol of England. The reason that we still see these telephone boxes is because they are a symbol of England, and you'll see them in all the travel posters for England. There's a telephone box, there's a London Bridge, all that kind of stuff. And these iconic phone boxes are such beloved sights that people are devising new purposes for them to ensure they don't disappear. So they are beloved. They are loved by lots of people, both locals in London and tourists alike. They expect them to be there in England. They're a symbol of England. They're iconic. So, of course, we don't want to get rid of them, even though people aren't really using them. So they're imagining or they're coming up with new purposes for them. They're devising new purposes for them.
Yeah. To devise is a great verb. It usually means you're inventing something. It could be maybe a piece of equipment, or it could be even a system that you devise. It's very close to the word device with a C, but it's not the same. A device is some sort of small usually it's electronic. It's a gadget that people have. Devise, though, is a verb, and it means you're inventing or planning or coming up with some sort of cool new system or procedure, or even a mechanism, but you're thinking about it carefully, and usually it's not something that just pops into your mind. You have to work on it for a little while.
And, of course, you need to work on some new ideas for these phone boxes because people don't want them to disappear. Now, in England, of course, if you're knighted by the Queen, you become a Sir or a Dame. So Giles Scott here was knighted by the Queen, so therefore he is Sir Giles Scott, and he is a British architect, and he came up with the original design. An architect, of course, is somebody who designs buildings, and the branch of science that they study is architecture. That is a branch of study, architecture, and if you study that and design buildings and draw blueprints and stuff like that, you are an architect.
I have heard people in Taiwan say, "Oh, I like those architectures." And they're referring to the style of buildings. Don't do that, guys. Don't put an S on architecture. Architecture is just the style or design of a building. It's not the building itself. So be careful with how you use that. Yeah, he was an architect. And I have noticed that, especially in England or even France, even their new buildings kind of want to take in the style of, 200, 300 years ago. They don't like very sleek buildings that look very modern. A lot of those buildings need to match everything, although things are changing. I prefer kind of that old-fashioned look. It just was so beautiful. And it seems like our buildings that we build in modern days aren't quite as fancy. They have straight sides and lots of glass or windows. But I loved the architecture in Europe generally, especially in England. Their cabs are even kind of old-fashioned looking. The black cab, I love those. And they still have those as well. I hope they hold on to those things. It's part of culture, and that's why it's in our culture unit.
Exactly. And this guy designed this phone box many years ago, and he intended for the boxes to be silver. So they're red now, but the original idea was for them to be silver in color. That was his intention. Here we've got the verb to intend. That's what he wanted for the boxes. He designed the boxes, and he thought they would be silver in color. However, the UK Post Office suggested that they be painted bright red, making them easy to spot. That's good. They painted them bright red. It's a good thing they did not paint them bright orange or that high-vis yellow color that you see in a lot of... Well, that would have been just really too much, okay? Red is a nice color. It's easily seen, and therefore that's the color that they picked. And we'll continue talking about this in just a couple of seconds, but right now we're going to take a break and listen to our Chinese teacher.
听众朋友大家好，我是安娜。我们今天要带大家到英国去看一个很经典的东西。如果你曾经在影集啦，或者是一些广告照片上面，可能会看到这个其实很经典的红色电话亭。没错，不过这一篇呢是设计成克漏字啦，我们就一边看一边来解题。好，那么虽然在现在这个手机时代很少人会用公共电话啦，但是还是蛮常见的。不过这一个句子当中，因为刚好挖成第一格的这个题目，所以我们仔细来看它的英文。 They are still common， 仍然很常见。 Despite the fact that， 尽管虽然，有多少的 people use public telephones in the era of the cell phone。 第一格的选项是 all， 所有的人。第二格大部分的人。第三格 few， 注意哦，是几乎没有。第四格的 D any， 任何 any 后面只能加单数，所以 any 可以先删掉。那么 A、B、C 的选项则是根据文意。多少人在手机的时代会用公共电话呢？当然是很少嘛，所以第一格答案选 C。好，为什么会这样呢？其中的原因啊，其实是因为这个红色电话亭根本就是一个英国的象征，而这些代表性的电话亭呢，如此的受大家的喜爱，以至于大家现在要设计一些新的用途。我们来看这段的第4句，刚好也设计成我们的第2格的题目。但是这一句话有点长的原因，是因为有一个特别句型叫做如此的，以至于我们把 such that 先抓出来。Such 后面修饰的是名词 beloved sights， 如此的受人喜爱的场景。That 后面表示一个结果，以至于大家现在在设计新的用途。出现第2格 to do something， 目的是为了怎么样不消失。根据文意，设计新的用途，虽然不打电话，但是用新的功能来让这些电话亭存在。所以第2格 A 的选项 imply 暗示着， B declare 宣告宣布， C retain 就有保留保持 keep 的意思，而 D 的 ensure 确保一件事情一定会发生。所以第2格选 D 的答案文意是最通顺的哦。那么现在呢，我们来看一下当时这个电话亭是怎么产生的。从第2段开始，其实是因为有一个英国的建筑师 Giles Scott。那么他当时呢，都提出了一个最初的设计。Scott 当时本来想要把这个电话亭做成银色的，但是英国的邮政局呢建议把它们涂成亮红色，这样电话亭呢就比较容易被注意到。好，不过在这句话呢最后面 red 之后又出现了一个逗点 making， 这里的 making 呢还原则是一个 which made， 它是一个补充说明非限定用法的关系子句，而比较特别的是 which 指的是逗点前面的整句话哦，也就是电话亭要漆成红色这件事情会使得电话亭比较容易被看到。
We're going to take a quick break. Stay tuned. We'll be right back. Welcome back, guys. We're talking about telephone boxes that are located in the UK or the United Kingdom, particularly in England, of course. So when we left you, we were talking about a British architect who was so famous in England that he was knighted. So he's Sir Giles Scott. I have to say, you won't find the first name Giles very often in the United States. And if you do come across it, it's usually a last name and not a first name. But they like that name Giles for men in England. So he's Sir Giles Scott. He was the architect or the designer, and he came up with the original design. But he intended or he meant for the boxes to be silver. I'm glad they aren't silver. They're so much cuter red. And the red isn't that bright tomato red. It's a beautiful darker red, which kind of looks more old-fashioned, which I love. So the UK Post Office, they were the ones who suggested and when we say they, we mean the boxes. They suggested they be painted bright red, making them easy to spot. Suggest is a tricky verb, guys. It has a different usage than you're probably used to. And I know it's difficult because I taught a lot of business people several years ago who always struggled with that verb to suggest. Suggest someone do something. You conjugate it differently. So spend a little time on that and you will be way ahead of most people in Taiwan. It's hard to learn.
Yeah, this article does not tell us specifically, but I'm wondering if there's a relationship between the red phone boxes and the double-decker buses of London because they're both red. So maybe the government wanted the phone boxes and the buses to be the same color. I'm not sure about that. We could probably talk about those double-decker buses in another program. But in any case, the public became fond of the color. The people in London and in England, they just love that red color for those phone boxes. And in the 1980s, which was, about 40 years ago, British Telecom, or BT, took over ownership of the boxes and proposed painting them yellow to match its brand. So BT is the phone company in the UK, British Telecom. They took over ownership of the boxes. Here we've got this verb phrase to take over. That just means you get control of something. It can mean a couple of things. For example, if I'm handling a case or something in the company and I've got something else to work on, I'll give it to somebody else. Hey, why don't you take over for me? You be responsible for this case now. And I guess it's kind of the same meaning here. They got control, they got ownership of these boxes.
We often use, as Tom just did, this verb phrase take over to talk about someone who has responsibility for something and then maybe they have to leave to go home. Maybe their shift is done at work. Well, the next person that comes in to take over from them then takes responsibility for that thing. So, yeah, British Telecom wanted to paint those cute red boxes yellow. I'm glad they lost this fight. There were campaigns against the move, and BT dropped the idea. A lot of times, if the public just lets the government know how they feel, and they're very loud about it. Sometimes it can get the government to drop plans to do something that's unpopular. And this was a very unpopular idea. Sometimes you have campaigns to elect, for example, a politician to office. There are advertising campaigns. And if there's a campaign against or for something, it means a lot of people are getting out there in the public and trying to convince or persuade people to change their mind about something. And it looks like the public won this particular argument because they were able to get BT to drop the idea of painting those cute telephone boxes yellow.
And they remained red, and they remain red till this day.
Yeah.
Now, these days, there's not much demand for public phones. That's true. If you travel to the UK, you're going to be bringing your own phone, and you'll probably arrange some kind of service for your phone when you're there, so you probably never need to use a public phone there in the UK. Yet, rather than removing the phone boxes, people are using them for other purposes. So yeah, nobody's really using them anymore. Maybe people are posing for pictures in front of them, but they're probably not actually using the phones inside of them, so they don't want to get rid of them. They're very iconic for the UK. So yeah, what are you going to do? You need to repurpose them. You need to give them another role.
Yeah, how can they use them in another way? To begin maybe a second life as something else. So there are over 150 boxes in different locations around the UK. And some are now serving or playing a role as a public library or a place where you can exchange books. It's a book exchange site or location. There's even one in the north of England that's become an art gallery, which is a great idea. A gallery is usually a big room or building, a big space in a building where people display things. Usually they're displaying works of art. Or maybe, I don't know, you can have galleries and actually display dresses that you've designed. You can display just about anything you want. But here, notice it's an art gallery. So you'll find paintings or pieces of sculpture, any type of art being shown to the public. And usually galleries are big open space and you walk around and kind of appreciate what you see. Some of these things are on sale. And if you have a lot of money, maybe you could buy a piece of art, maybe a beautiful painting.
Yeah, but I'm trying to imagine Picasso's Guernica fitting inside one of these phone booths. But you never know. Some art is minimal. Maybe they can fit miniatures or something inside there. I'm sure they'll figure something out, and they'll turn those phone boxes into art galleries. And several house automated external defibrillators. Excuse me, that word is even hard for me to say.
It's hard to say.
I just said it wrong, so I'm going to do it again.
Okay, here.
Automated external defibrillators. Okay? And if that word is too hard for you to say as it is for me, you can just say AED. What is that? Well, it's a device that can restart a person's heart in an emergency. I think it's that thing where you take those probes on the chest and go zzz, and they kind of jerk up in the air and stuff like that. So that's what an AED is.
Yeah, you'll often see them used on TV shows or in the movies. If someone has a heart attack and their heart stops, hopefully there's an AED nearby that can help save their lives. Okay, so these are devices that restart a person's heart in an emergency. Remember, you don't have to say that defibrillator word, which is kind of hard. Just say an AED. And if someone looks at you funny and they don't know what that stands for, just say, that helps shock someone's heart back, so it starts beating again, and they'll know. So here's our final piece of advice. If you visit the UK and you see a red phone box, hey, take a glance inside. Go look and see what they have inside. Now that you know that they're being repurposed or being used in a different way, you might want to know what that particular telephone box is up to these days. Yeah, it's kind of fun. I love that they're not just, ripping them out and moving them off the property, that they're still going to be around. They're so pretty.
I'm wondering if there are any iconic structures like that here in Taiwan that are no longer useful. I don't really remember the phone boxes in Taiwan being particularly attractive or iconic, but there might be other things. I remember the old bus kiosks. Many years ago, if you wanted to buy a bus ticket for the Taipei buses, it could give you 10 rides on one ticket.
Oh, nice.
There was a kiosk for that. They sold other things as too, magazines, newspapers, and stuff like that. But of course, those are all gone, and we pay for our bus rides in different ways. But yeah, take a glance inside one of those phone boxes. You never know what you might find. You might be surprised.
You might be. Someone who's going to surprise you occasionally will be our Chinese teacher. Let's listen now.
好啦，那接下来呢就漆成红色啦，然后大家就开始什么样这种颜色呢？我们来看一下，在第4格当中 ，the public 大众 became 变得，第3格什么 the color 选项 A fond of 喜欢 B capable of 能够如何如何 C anxious about 对什么感到焦虑 D curious about 对什么感到好奇，所以文章走到这里是大家都觉得很喜欢这个红色，所以在1980年代，英国电信 BT 就接管了这些电话亭的拥有权，并且提议把它们涂成黄色，然后配合品牌。可是有很多的 campaign 抗议行动，所以后来 BT 就放弃了要把红色改为黄色这种想法。好，接下来走到第3段咯。到现在当然对于公共电话的需求并不是很多啦，但是呢大家还是没有把电话亭拆掉，而是呢把它用成其他的用途。我们来看一下第4题，也就是第3段第2句这个地方，不晓得填了什么之后出现 removing the phone boxes 逗点 people are using them for other purposes。 我们来看一下有哪些选项可以选。 A When it comes to 当提到什么什么主题 B except for 排除什么人事物在外 C 因为什么结果 as a result of 就是表示原因啦 D rather than 而非而不是并没有，所以第4格第4题我们应该要选 D rather than并没有 removing 移除这一些公共电话亭，而大家正在用作其他的用途。哪一些用途呢？比如说像是这个画廊啊，或者是图书馆交换站啊，甚至第5题我们在这里出现了一个动词，有一些还放 AED。 这个动词呢 A 的选项是交易 B house 很特别哦，在这里不是房子，而是安置放置。 C order 的话呢则有点餐的意思或者是命令。 D 的 check 就是确认一下，所以电话亭还可以放 AEDs， 所以第5格选动词 B 的选项 house 放这些东西会比较适合。以上是我们今天的内容，我是安娜，我们下次见咯。
That's it for today, everybody. Oh, gee, my smartphone doesn't work right now.
No?
I need to find a public phone, and maybe I can find one of those phone boxes in London if I ever have such an emergency. But no, I'm just kidding. My phone works fine. And our program works fine. And of course, we'll be back again next time with another edition of our program. So please join us then. From all of us here at English Digest, I'm Tom.
I'm Stephanie.
Bye.
Bye.